Well, joining me now, John Miller, CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst, Jamil Jaffer, Founder and Executive Director of the National Security Institute at George Mason Law School, and Pete Lapp, retired FBI Special Agent. Let me begin with you, John. Investigators are looking into all of this, of course. They say Jabbar was inspired by ISIS, that he pledged his allegiance to the terror group as well. How important is it to find out how he became radicalized and if he was directed or just inspired by ISIS?
It's pretty important to find out how. It's even more important to find out if he was directed, because you're going to want to trace that back to who is directing him. Does ISIS have people on the ground? Do they have people on the ground in a country other than Syria or those territories? So that would be critical. But you know, he has 3 phones, 2 laptops that they've recovered. They got into one phone very quickly, and I believe that helped validate some of this fealty to ISIS. They have to crack a couple of other phones and computers, but that will get them along the way to answer questions about what propaganda he was looking at, how many times he was looking at, when that intensified, whether he was communicating on a platform that might be in one of those devices, including some of the encrypted platforms where that trail might still be there. All important to know, but clearly he fits the model of pretty much who ISIS targets with that propaganda, which is someone who's having money troubles, family troubles, business troubles, self-esteem problems, whose life is spiraling downward. Because what's the promise, Laura, right? They say, if you go with this cause, you get valor, you get belonging, you get empowerment. It fills the voids and offers what we call this loser to lion phenomenon.
You know, you're nodding along, Jamil, and you hear that. And I have to ask, you hear about they're seeking people out. How does one find this? I mean, to be radicalized, there are a lot of people who fit the bill, of people who have money problems, marital problems, who don't then get radicalized by ISIS or not found by them in some way, shape, or form. When you're looking to try to untangle that web, where are you going?
Well, a couple of things. One, you have to look at whether he had some mental health issues. Obviously, a guy who's talking about killing his family and that not being enough of a splash to get his message across, that guy's obviously got mental health issues that go along with these marital problems, along with the financial problems, along with the radicalization. Then you add to that, he's probably going out and searching for content online, right? Videos on YouTube or other platforms or on websites, right? There's a lot of information available to Americans if they want to go find it of all sorts of terrible varieties, including terrorist content. And so that's one of the challenges. And then, of course, once you get into those networks and those circles, people might start pushing you content. You might be having conversations with people who might be trying to direct you or radicalize you even further. So we don't know today whether he was simply inspired or directed, and whether he was radicalized by another individual online through communications, or he just sought it out himself. But what's clear is he had the requisite troubles, as John correctly laid out, and he probably, to be candid, had some mental health issues that led him to believe it was important to kill his own family.
I mean, he had multiple layers of this attack, Pete. It was not just the truck. It was also the idea of detonating other devices. Thank God they did not get detonated. But you hear from his family. I mean, his own brother told us, quote, he was very well-tempered, slow to anger, kind, soft-spoken. Something screwed him up. He's the type of person. Someone or something fogged his mind. You hear that from his brother, of course, and they must be in shock of what's gone on. But is there a way, when you're looking to figure out what happened, to prevent this again? Obviously, he's dead. He can't be brought to justice in terms of a criminal prosecution. But can you prevent others from this sort of radicalization?
It's hard. The lone wolf phenomenon is really difficult because there's a radicalization that goes on, whether it's self or whether others are involved. But there's a lack of leakage, if you will, in terms of your intent. I don't know how close his brother and he were, or the rest of his family, and everyone who's coming out, who's being interviewed after the fact and knew him, are saying that this is so atypical for the kind of guy that we knew him to be. But I think when we don't see these leakages until it's too late. You know, it's hours before his attack when he's on Facebook and social media. You know, his intent is very clear if you're following that. Those are real difficult, the most difficult cases for law enforcement to really assess and take action to prevent, because there's just not a lot of hints that are out there.
An important point in terms of the when they would know this. Well, John, CNN obtained a bulletin from the Homeland Security Department that had warned law enforcement about possible vehicle ramming attacks during the holidays. Was there a breakdown of some sorts in New Orleans for the security?
You know, I think one of the problems with New Orleans in this incident is that this isn't a one-off for them. I mean, there's crowded nights like New Year's Eve, but on Bourbon Street, every night's a party, and it's often blocked to traffic, and they're used to things going on there and maintaining control. Also, Laura, there's this flip side, right? I mean, they've had 10 shootings on Bourbon Street in the past months with multiple casualties, but that is something that, you know, New Orleans residents have learned to take in stride because crime is an issue they understand there. This was something they couldn't wrap their heads around because it was terrorism, and clearly there's going to be a reassessment about bollards, about blockers, about concrete block or large vehicles, because it may be locking the barn door after the horse is gone, which is probably the wrong expression for a tragedy this deep, but it's a common malady, which is taking care of the problem after. They had these barriers. They went into disrepair. Some were removed. Some were just left to rust. They were going to be replaced, but who knows when, maybe for the Super Bowl. Things were happening too slowly. There's a lack of a sense of urgency there, which will now be fixed, but for all the wrong reasons.
John, thank you. I mean, the idea of there being a warning about potential vehicle ramming, you can imagine so many cities across the country preparing for the unknown, and now we know what has happened. Pete, thank you so much. John, Jamil, stay with me, and please stand by.